I think that we will be able to work together. I hope so. We make no pretensions of being any kind of significant force here in occupied Zambia. We've just begun. We've been working with occupied Zambia inside the country since 2002. We've been working with PAC for 40 years, or we've connected and worked with PAC for many years and participated even in the debates that happened in the United States about accepting the negotiated settlement. We were opposed to it. We were, PAC and African People's Socialist Party were almost one organization within the United States. So we had a long relationship until the return. After the return, we heard nothing from them for a long period of time. And I think there's a political and ideological basis for that. In 2002, we were reconnected by the person who was then Secretary General of the PAC. And I was keynote for the 8th Congress that happened in Utata. And so we've worked for a long time to try to make some things happen. So I think there should be no fundamental reason we couldn't work together. Listen to what you've said. But one difference is we have differences. And because most of what you've said we see as tactical, representing a tactical issue. What we have concluded some time ago is that the African liberation movement worldwide has run into its limitations when fought within the borders that have been created for us by imperialism, whether that's South Africa, Ghana, Trinidad, Jamaica, the United States, etc. So what we have are different fronts of what we call the African Revolution. So I participate in the United States as not some kind of making some kind of revolution for African Americans or Black Americans or something like that. We are the U.S. front of the African Revolution. Africa here, who presides over the African Socialist International as Secretary General, but he also leads the work that has developed the Swedish front of the African Revolution, where we have comrades who organize there. We have comrades in the Bahamas, the Bahamian Front. So we are one revolutionary organization, and our primary objective is the total liberation and unification of Africa and African people everywhere. That places us in the same context of Sobukwe, who was an Africanist, and who talked about Africa, 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 which is why the Pan-Africanist symbol, the Pan-Africanist Congress symbol, has this star with the star actually being located where? In Ghana, because of the influence of Nkrumah, right? So our objective is the total liberation of our Africa. And to do that, we've concluded a long time ago that we have to have an organization, a revolutionary organization of the nature of the UNIA of Lamarcus Garvey. That is to say that it recognized that we were fighting on different fronts as one African people. So that every place we fought, we were fighting from a strategical position. That it was not, there are Africans in the United States, for example, who call themselves New Africanists. And they have concluded that because we have been in the United States, and we were enslaved in the United States, and we were enslaved primarily in the South, that somehow we have become a nation with our national homeland being a portion of the United States South. And so that is how they see. They say New Africans. We disagree with that in the most serious way for a number of reasons, because that places us in the same category as the settlers who took this land. And they claim that they were now Afrikaners. This is their land, they are Afrikaners. That was the same principle of the Zionists, white people who took the land of the Palestinian people. And then for us to be here, where the basic and fundamental contradiction of these people in concentration camps that they call Indian reservations suffer primarily because of the theft of the land and the genocide committed against them. And for us to be talking about New Africans, then that places us aligned with the forces who have taken the land from the indigenous people. One. Two, Because everywhere we located as African people, we find ourselves confronted with essentially the same profound contradiction. And for me to be a new African and separated from the rest of Africa is ridiculous. All Africans are landless. That's what my capture meant, that I became landless when somebody came to my Africa and kidnapped me and then snatched me and dispersed the rest of us around the world. We've been landless since. We were landless there, we're landless here. We're landless in Sierra Leone, we're landless in Ghana, we're landless in occupied Tanzania. So what we have concluded some time ago is that we have to have a revolution. And it's this revolution that will liberate African people, and that this revolution has to be led by the African working class. Because we have suffered and fought for every time there's been a so-called victory for us, it has been the petty bourgeoisie who has gone, who has ascended to the leadership, whether that's here with Zuma, Ramaphosa, or whether that has been in other places where so-called revolution happened, and the only beneficiaries have been a certain sector of our population. These second classes do exist. They were not necessarily inherent to our Africa, but what has happened to us, a whole world economy was born off of the enslavement and colonization of black people in the rest of the world. A national economy. It wasn't just a South African economy, it's a national economy. That's why what we see is crisis all over the world, imperialist crisis. And that crisis comes as a consequence of peoples around the world taking back their resources, land and other resources, whether it's in Afghanistan, whether that is here. This is the crisis. And so this capitalist enterprise, this capitalist project that was born of colonialism. We talk about, Lenin once said that imperialism is the highest stages of capitalism. He said, no, no, no. Capitalism is the highest stages of imperialism because it started through expropriating land and resources and people by this empire, the empire. The empire was able to develop capitalism as a consequence of what it did to Africa and the colonization of the rest of the world. That's our view of that. And so when we talk about colonial capitalism, capitalism born of our attack on us, when you talk about black socialism, what I'm talking about is the whole capitalist enterprise has its origin in the attack on Africa. There could not have been. I mean, think about this. Would capitalism exist if there had not been the attack on Africa that resulted in what we have here and what we have in Africans being, there would be no capitalism. So the origin of capitalism has been the expropriation of our value, our labor, our lands, and what have you. And if we are to ever be free, we have to take it back. The whole piece, the whole thing, one. And two, if there's going to be ever freedom and peace in the world, it's going to be because Africa becomes free. Not as South Africa, Ghana, etc., but we have to have fronts of the African liberation movement located everywhere. Because the imperialists, you talk about, we have here what we refer to as a settler neo-colonialism here, right? That's true. But this entity could not have existed for 30 days without the assistance of imperialist white power around the world. And here we are fighting alone in these different entities because I'm a black Brit or an Afro-Swede or all of these other characterizations that's been conferred on us by our oppressors. So we reject that totally. We are one people. And we also recognize that the process of enslaving us, that this new economy that emerged as a consequence of slavery and colonialism, this is what Karl Marx referred to as the primitive accumulation of capital, that accumulation of capital that did not come about as a consequence of capitalist production, but was a starting point, and where he talks about that being this primitive accumulation originating from turning Africa into a warren for the commercial hunting of black skins. The whole thing comes from that. And so when they created this new economy, this whole economic, there is a sector of the African population that relies on that relationship for its own success, And this is the introduction of class into our relationship. They are no longer the people. They are part of the imperialist enterprise. I'm talking about Zuma. I'm talking about Ramaphosa. Yes, I know that in our own lives, they are what we might call patriotic sector of the African petty bourgeoisie. They're patriots. They are also opposed they're also opposed to white power. And they're opposed to white power. Why? Because the entire African nation all around the world we suffer national oppression. National oppression doesn't say we're just oppressing the workers or the peasants. National oppression oppresses the whole nation. And Zuma and Ramaphosa are part of the nation. But freedom for them means something absolutely different than what it means for the African workers and the poor peasants who produce all the value. Zuma and the rest of them, they don't produce value. How can you have a labor union leader that's a billionaire, and the workers that he was supposed to represent are starving? This is the most ridiculous and absurd, because he is one of them. He is no longer the people. Zuma is not the people. And I'm saying this, he's black. And yes, he might take a black stance, and we like black people to take black stances, but just because somebody takes Obama, another creature of imperialism, and they served imperialism mightily, and they helped to rock the masses of our people to sleep because they look just like us. They eat fufu. They dance better than we dance. They got better dashikis than we got. They know all the handshakes and the rest of that. And so they are really helpful to our oppressors because of that. And Nkrumah characterized that as neo-colonialism. It's colonialism that with a new face. It's white power in black skin. And sometimes what we have, just like within the bourgeoisie proper, the reason there was a DA and all the other white imperialist or settler parties is because the bourgeoisie itself has differences in terms of, and their political stuff in the electoral politic anyway within the bourgeois democracy is simply a nonviolent contest between the sectors of the bourgeoisie for control of the state. And so they contend with each other. And we see their representatives in our community contending with each other over the heads of the masses of our people. So Obama, black people all around the world and in the United States still seduced by Obama. By the memory, because he's black. But he did not represent us. He represented a certain sector of the bourgeoisie. Jesse Jackson too, but a different sector of the bourgeoisie. Jesse Jackson came from a different base because his popularity came as a consequence of milking his relationship with Dr. Martin Luther King. And so he has some kind of base within the African population that required him to exert some kind of loyalty to that base. But this other man, Obama, has no connection to the African community. He was simply loyal to white power. So you got both of them who are neo-colonialists to the max. I tell you, they are both neo-colonialists, Obama and Jesse Jackson. You never hear either of them condemn the social system itself. And neither of them work for the masses of our people. They'll lead a demonstration to make people tired, and then they'll have a most militant prayer when they get there. You understand? And unlike their others who make a non-militant prayer, they have militant prayer services as a part of that. So we believe that revolution is absolutely necessary. And when we talk about short-term and midterm and other kinds of objectives. When we talk about programs, limited programs, how did you characterize the different programs? Like in the ANC, the point is, compared to what? Okay, they got a minimum program. What's the maximum program? You gotta have a maximum program to which this minimum program is compared. Otherwise, your minimum program is your maximum program. I don't give a damn what you say. If you don't have a maximum program that's being advanced, and that the people we represent must know what our maximum program is, and say, okay, we might fight for the land in this way now, but where we're going all the way, but this is our program. And our program has to be revolution. I think we have to put revolution back on the agenda for the masses of the people. And I believe it's possible to participate in the electoral process. I have no fundamental issues with that in terms of principle. But on our agenda, it has to be different. The ANC will not ever be able to represent the platform that the African People's Socialist Party will advance here. And neither, my beloved, I have a real sentimental and romantic relationship with the PAC. I believe that Sobukwe was one of the greatest leaders that Africa has ever produced. There were contradictions, but there are contradictions in all things, and Sobukwe died before many of these contradictions could be resolved, and what have you. But I think he was a fundamental force, and I think he's one of the most unrecognized representatives of the African liberation movement. I really, truly believe that. But, so anyway, I probably talked too long without being as coherent as I need to be. But I do say that we are practical revolutionaries also. And what you just mentioned in terms of the land expropriation, the projects, we call that dual power. We create, even in the process of making revolution against white power, we create our own power as an incipient power that is dual power. It's a power that that is not just there, but it's a power that we create with the objective of contending with white power, contending with their power. We say it's a dual and contending power. And I wish we had brought some things with you, because we have actual practical programs where we engage in creating a black power. It is nothing at this point in terms of we can say, well, look, the U.S. is crumbling now because of our project, but it is not just a project for the U.S., but one that we're trying to implement everywhere we are. Africans must begin to exercise political power, and the African working class must regain confidence in its own ability to lead, its own ability to govern, its own ability to overturn our oppressors, because too often our own class, the African working class, has no confidence in itself because somebody has a PhD or somebody speaks, big words and things like that. They assume that these are the people who inherently are supposed to be our leaders. And we say, in some other circumstances I would use a dirty word, but I've heard that people cussing demonstrate a limit, a certain kind of intellectual limitation, so I won't do that. But the fact is that, and Africans are suffering all over the continent of Africa, all over the world. There's a huge furor in the United States now because of the latest killing in Sacramento, California. There's a whole mobilization in Ghana. Now, thousands of people demonstrating because of the U.S., the government's making this deal with the United States government. That's magnificent. And Togo and other places all over, strikes and things. People have been on strikes for things like a month. Think about Africans got nothing, can be on strike for a month and what have you, in places like Togo, Congo. I mean, we're fighting all these different places, and we have to be connected from our perspective. We want revolution every place, and that has to be a coordinated kind of revolutionary project that we're involved in. I've overtalked it. I have a habit of doing that. And, we believe, though, that there is a kind of antagonism that exists between the neo-colonial forces. They represent white power. They don't represent us. Neo-colonialists cannot represent us. That's a different force. They work against the interests of the people. They're black. They might, again, know all the traditional dances and things like that, but they're no longer the people. And in most instances, it was voluntary. Obama's a very smart man. He didn't get tricked. He didn't get sucked into it. There was no accident. He understood the contradiction that exists between us and imperialism, and he moved his way in there for his own benefit. I understand his children do quite well, etc., while the rest of our children don't. And I have no sympathies for Zuma, none at all. And I have, and Ramaphosa, they're kith and kin in terms of their class stance and their willingness to continue this rotten process of expropriating value that keeps our people starving and living in shanty towns and police violence impacting us all the time. You never see Zuma or any of them standing up in these shanties and representing the masses of working people who have nothing. They have nothing. And you don't hear them even complaining about it in a meaningful way. They talk about an abstraction of land expropriation without compensation. Who does that? Who expropriates? The neo-colonial state? Who does that? Whose state is it? I've heard BLF, they talk about how they have to nationalize this and nationalize. Okay, there was nationalization even under the apartheid regime. When you talk about nationalization, you're talking about the state ownership. Whose state? The workers have no state. You say we have no country, and that is true. Africans have no country anywhere. We want it all back. And you're right. We're going to have to expropriate the expropriators. And that's exactly how it's going to happen. Now, Mandela comes to power, and he makes a statement that the greatest problem that we're confronted with is white fears and black expectations. What the hell is he talking about? He's a grand, noble Negro, invited by the imperialists to speak. Whoever heard of the British Parliament inviting a revolutionary to speak? Who ever heard of the U.S. Congress? The same Congress that's killing us right now, the same Congress that supports a state apparatus that has identified what they call black identity extremists as domestic terrorists. And black identity extremists are those people who recognize that we are Africans. We are Africans. And they've said that that's against the law, so that they have intelligence operations that we're engaging us right now, even as we have this discussion. They're not people. As black as Obama may pretend to be, he has a left-hand jump shot, he knows he sings well, and the rest of that, but he is not us. He has gone over to the other side. He's done that consciously. His wife lives well, his little ugly children live well, but the rest of us continue. So what we say is that revolution is the only solution. That's the thing that's on, and everything that we do, tactics, strategy, we develop, part of the process of taking back our Africa, every square inch, from Cape to Cairo. We want everything back, and that's what we're about. And I really appreciate, having, and so I mean, there's nothing that you said, generally speaking, in terms of what it is that you do, that I can't see why we could not work together. Yeah. Uhuru. Oh, yeah, there's another thing about that, too. Because I don't know how familiar you are with the things that we've done. We've had various congresses that we have, and it has been my responsibility up until now to develop like the political reports. And some of these political reports really take on some of the critical ideological questions that we are confronted with. And one reason we're confronted with so many ideological questions is because at a time during the revolution, particularly the 60s, the 60s was a very important moment in history, not just for African people, but as the Chinese used to say that revolution was the main trend in the entire world. Oppressed people everywhere were trying to be free. And in for us, most of us, that revolution was crushed. It was defeated. And assassinations all over the place, Sharpsville 60s and Malcolm, Martin Luther King, the Black Panther Party assaulted, the co-founder of the African People's Socialist Party assassinated in that period. I was in and out of prison so often, I had to find a newspaper to find out where I was. The fact is that our movement, our revolution was crushed. And there were many ideological issues, trends that existed within our movement that went unresolved. We just talked about that. You say, how Comrade Joe died before many of the things. So Nkrumah didn't even understand the class question until he was overthrown. As much genius as he brought to us in leadership, the class question was not something he understood until he was overthrown. It was then that occurred. And so there are a lot of outstanding questions. And one of these questions has been about white people. Because white people have been mysterious to us. And the reason I say mysterious is clearly they were not us. Clearly, we had never experienced, nor are we familiar with any experience in human life that we saw with white people. I mean, the genocide, the murder, the brutality. I mean, even, for example, take this land. Because I was going to look at the U.S. as an example. So if you have white people, right, who want to settle here, they didn't have to take the whole goddamn, the whole land. I mean, take, 40 acres or something like that. They, all of it, and kill everybody who opposes that, right? And in the U.S. there have been people like the original Nation of Islam characterized that the white man is the devil, right? And as a young person, if I were religious, I would have united with that, because if there was a devil, then certainly that's what, and that was appealing to a lot of African people. Now we understand this is the devil, right? And even Khomeini characterized the U.S. as the great Satan, right? And then there was someone who's determined that white people, what do you call it? Genetic mutations. And so they are not the rest of us. And but I don't think there's anything really mysterious. I think white people are people. I think white people are people whose actions, ideas, etc., are informed by the fact that they live at the expense of other people, that they come from lands and territories that were barren and hostile, where nature itself was hostile to them. And they've gone to these other places that provided life for them. And they've created a social system. There was no such thing as white people or Europe until the 17th century. White people were invented through slavery and colonialism. And this is how, before then, these people who we call white were what do you call them, Normans and Goths and Celts and all of this. There was no such thing as a white man. They identified themselves primarily in relationship to each other. The thing that consolidated white identity, if you will, and even Europe as a place, was slavery. It was our enslavement that gave them a commonality, economic commonality, a sense of sameness. They could, and this is the birth of the white man and the birth of Europe. And I call Europe a nation. I mean, I know they call France and Germany. I don't see a difference in France and Germany except the way they talk. You understand? So that's happened. But white people are real and they exist. And our approach to them, we have a strategic approach to the existence of white people. Because unless we have an ability, well, anyway, there's a strategic approach to that. And we have created, through the African People's Socialist Party, an entity that is called the African People's Solidarity Committee. This is a committee of white people who work directly under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. They are black power in white face. They work in the white community. The fact is that all the resources of African people are located in some white community, someplace in this world. All of our resources are there. Their job, among other things, is to go into the white community and bring back our resources. They have initiated even mass reparations movement. People talk about reparation. We are collecting reparations right now through this organization. We've had hundreds of white people marching in the streets as recently as, when was that? April. As recently as April, demanding reparations to African people. So it's a mass mobilization. So that does exist. The African People's Solidarity Committee is an organization of the African People's Socialist Party. And its work is there. There's nothing like, we are not talking about integration. In fact, they would not use the word integration. We're not talking about charity. They know that they're talking about, how do we say it, reparations, you know, not charity. That's our line, that's their line, that has to be their line. If it's not their line, they get fired, and the rest of that. I mean, it's just that simple. They work there, and they will, this is not a presentation I'm making that is not made before them. They understand this is exactly what our politics is and who we are theoretically. And if there is any hope for white people joining humanity, it is going to be in their ability to unite under the leadership of African people and to be actively engaged in the process of reparations, repairing the damage that they've done. We look at the question in South Africa, and I call it South Africa because that's what it is. It's not ours. And where white people now can conveniently be a part of us. And we say that is an absolute obscenity. And you don't do that. You don't steal everything that everybody's got, brutalize them, murder them, and then say, okay, let's all live together. I'll keep everything that I've stolen from you. I don't have to pay any consequences for what I've done to you, but we are now all one. That's an obscenity. The Rainbow Nation is a fallacy. And just like Jesse Jackson, who came up with the Rainbow Coalition, was fallacious himself. And I just find it deplorable that we have that kind of misleadership impacting us. And I was really so surprised, but perhaps I shouldn't have been surprised. A few days ago, I was in Alexander. I spoke to a young man. How old was he? Maybe. He was in his 20s. Wouldn't you say? Yeah, his 20s. And how he was arguing that there's no black and no white, you know, and that's not how we understand things. So it was an interesting kind of debate we had on right there in the streets. And then he told me that he was a loyal member of the African National Congress. And, you know, I mean, I'm thinking that this is just 1994, you know, and this young man is talking about no black and no white, you know, and of course you can't say one settler, one bullet. You can't say bullet, bullet, settler, settler. So, but there are places in the U.S. and Chicago where people don't remember Fred Hampton, and in Oakland people don't know Huey P. Newton and what have you. But anyway, comrades, as I said, I have a tendency, I overtalked it. I want to express appreciation for your kind invitation and the hospitality, because y'all keep this up, you're going to make me think that you recognize that I am an African. You understand? Yeah, Africa.
No, thank you, Chair. I think that what we do is to allow any questions and any further reflections. I'm very interested in the process that you are attempting with this white folk, where you say organize yourself.
No, we're going to say organize yourself.
Or we organize you?
Yeah, you go out and carry out what we have laid out for you. It's our project. No,
that's very interesting.
No.
Well,
but this is not new. The African People's Solidarity Committee was created in what year? 1976. So yeah, it's not new. It's been, and they're organizing all over the U.S. right now under our leadership.
That's very beautiful. I mean, I think the Field Must Fall movement tried almost a similar program. But our attitude is simply to say they know what they've done. They must go to your communities and they must organize to bring them our stuff. That has been our position. But we can see that's an interesting development there. I don't think our movement will move that direction soon. I think we're going to continue to say to them, hey, you stole our stuff. You go tell your people to bring it back. You know exactly what you've done. But I think it's just important to raise that issue, because often when people tend to not know what to do, when we agree with what you work guys are saying, but what must we do? So we will some of those will refer them to what.
Refer them to us.
Yeah.
we have some experience in that point. Believe me, we have some experience, and believe me that it has been really effective. In 1966, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. This is the organization that in the United States that advanced the Black Power slogan demand. 1966. I was a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And in that organization, there were white members of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. The name was an anachronism. It was born in the civil rights theme, and that's why it called itself that. Even though there were some pacifists, as Malcolm would